رأينا نفعا لجيشنا أن نجري بعضا من الإجراءات الضرورية في مناصب الجيش.
The voice of Hussein Bin Talal, the third king of the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. A controversial figure, never far from a political crisis.
وسيادته على أراضيه ومياهه في تخوم الوطن العربي الشرقية، فإنه من العار أن تطعنه يد عربية من الخلف.
He came to power in a succession crisis after his grandfather's assassination.
من أصعب المواقف اللي جابتها هي وقوفي إلى جانب الجد المؤسس على بوابة المسجد الأقصى.
He joined Egypt and Syria in the 1967 war against Israel.
أيها الرجال في أرض المعركة، اقتلوهم حيث وجدتموهم بأسلحتكم بأسنانكم. إخوانكم في العروبة معكم في هذه المعركة البطولية التاريخية.
He walked a tightrope between the Arab world, Israel, the Palestinians, and the West.
أقسم بالله أن أحافظ على الدستور وأن أخلص للأمة.
Cynical opportunist, maneuvering to stay in power, or a major political figure whose legacy is still felt in the Middle East today. This is the story of King Hussein of Jordan. The 20th of July 1951 was a critical day in the history of Jordan. King Abdullah bin al-Hussein, the founder of the kingdom, was attending Friday prayers at Al-Aqsa Mosque in eastern Jerusalem when he was confronted by a young Palestinian man. Abdullah was shot dead at the gate of the mosque. He had paid the ultimate price for what Palestinians saw as his too close relationship with the new state of Israel. Jordan had annexed the West Bank and Jerusalem, along with its Palestinian population, in the 1948 war that they call Al-Nakba, the catastrophe. Abdullah's death would determine the life and career of his grandson, the teenage Prince Hussein. King Abdullah was murdered in front of his 15-year-old grandson, Prince Hussein Bin Talal. Hussein had had a very special relationship with his grandfather. The death of the king had a profound effect on him, both at the time and throughout his life and career. It brought home how serious the threat to the crown could be and the gravity of his responsibilities as king in the years to come.
من أصعب المواقف اللي جابتها في بدايات هذه الرحلة هي وقوفي إلى جانب الجد المؤسس على بوابة المسجد الأقصى المبارك. تلك اللحظات اللي تغير فيها كل شيء بالنسبة لي.
The decision was that Prince Naif should act as interim regent of Jordan. He assumed the role on the 20th of July 1951 and ruled in his older brother's place for 7 weeks until Talal was deemed fit to take the throne on the 6th of September. The principal British military figure in Jordan for over a decade had been Sir John Bagot Glubb, known locally as Glubb Pasha. He commanded and trained the Jordanian army and, along with other leading politicians, was opposed to the regent Naif. Glubb now played a key role in the succession crisis. He and Prime Minister Tawfiq Abul Huda decided to bring Prince Talal back from Switzerland to succeed his father. But this was part of a longer-term plan to cultivate the young Prince Hussein. They saw potential in him, as well as some of his grandfather's qualities. But as he was too young to become king, Glubb and his supporters wanted to put his father Talal on the throne until the time was right for Hussein. Another key player in the intrigue was Hussein's mother, Queen Zayn al-Sharaf. Zayn was the most prominent woman in the Hashemite royal family. She had a strong personality and spoke 4 languages. She would support Hussein throughout his long and difficult career, but now used all her influence to implement Glubb's Machiavellian plan to put Talal on the throne. Needless to say, when Prince Naif and his men discovered Glubb's plan, they began to plot their own route to the crown. In August 1952, Prince Hussein was on holiday in Geneva with his mother and family when an envelope arrived from the Jordanian Prime Minister addressed to His Majesty King Hussein. It described what had happened in Amman, 18-year-old as his successor. The constitution stipulated that Hussein couldn't take the throne until he was 18 by the Muslim calendar. So a regency council was formed of the Prime Minister, members of the House of Representatives, and senior senators to perform the functions of the monarch. In the meantime, Hussein returned to Britain to spend 6 intensive months at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. On the 2nd Hussein was crowned the 3rd king of Jordan. On the same day, his cousin was crowned Faisal II of the other country under strong British influence in the region, Iraq. Hussein became king at a time of uncertainty and instability in the region. He faced 3 main challenges. First, the British. King Abdullah had agreed the Anglo-Jordanian Treaty with them in 1948, allowing them to maintain military bases there. Their presence was a dominant one. Second, Israel and the Palestinians. 4 years after the founding of Israel and Jordan's annexation of the West Bank and its Palestinian population, Hussein had to deal with this enormous issue. Thirdly, Gamal Abdel Nasser had overthrown the Egyptian king, putting the future of monarchies in the Arab world into question and influencing Hussein's future relationship with Nasser. Hussein surrounded himself with a small circle: his mother, Queen Zayn, his uncle Sharif Nasser bin Jamil from Hashemite Iraq, his cousin and lifelong friend, Zayd ibn Shakir, and a core group of men who'd been loyal to King Abdullah, mainly from inside the army. A year after Hussein became king, in October 1953, the vulnerability of the West Bank became crystal clear. Israeli troops, led by Ariel Sharon, overran the village of Qibya. It was a glimpse of the future. Israel claimed there were Palestinian infiltrators in the village who'd carried out operations inside Israel, but at least 69 civilians were killed, including women and children. The attack on Qibya was a key moment in Hussein's relationship with the Palestinians, who felt the Jordanian army did nothing to stop the Israelis. It asked questions of Jordan's presence and role in the West Bank and provoked protests across the country as Palestinians accused the Jordanian army of failing to protect their people. The young king was faced by mass social unrest and forced to confront the most complex problem the Middle East has ever faced, and one which remains today: Palestinian refugees. But Palestinian anger was not only directed at Jordan. Britain was also their target, and Sir John Bagot Glubb in particular. He commanded the Jordanian army, and the Palestinians accused Glubb Pasha of complicity in the Qibya attack and a failure to defend the people of the village. Glubb Pasha effectively ran the Jordanian army, so Hussein's relationship with him was crucial, but difficult. Glubb was much older, but there was more. Hussein knew that he and his country would never be truly independent as long as the British remained in Jordan. Coming up, how Hussein would address this strained relationship and end 40 years of British military involvement in Jordan. By 1956, King Hussein of Jordan was embarrassed by the continued British military presence in his country and was looking for ways of ridding himself of the army commander, Sir John Bagot Glubb. Hussein's grandfather had not tolerated opposition, but for now, Hussein observed the emergence of new political factions with interest. Hussein faced further opposition over a new regional alliance, the Baghdad Pact. Supported by the US, it was created in 1955 by Britain, Iraq, Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan, partly to combat Soviet influence in the Middle East. Hussein was tempted by the military and financial support it would provide, but Arab nationalism turned out to be a stronger force. Protesters led by opposition parties took to the streets, and Hussein complied by deciding not to join the Baghdad Pact. The Egyptian president, Gamal Abdel Nasser's relationship with Jordan was tense. He believed what he called reactionary regimes and Arab monarchies should all be toppled. Nasser had led the Free Officers, a nationalist movement in the Egyptian army, to remove King Farouk of Egypt in 1952. A similar group now developed within the Jordanian army. Its aim was to remove Hussein, but the king managed to get rid of them, and Glubb, and the British in one fell swoop. King Hussein's relationship with Britain embarrassed him among the Jordanian opposition and in Nasser's Egypt. Ridding himself of Glubb became his #1 priority. The main disagreement between the two men was the complete absence of Jordanians among the senior officer ranks of the army. Then, Glubb presented Hussein with the opportunity he'd been waiting for. On the 28th of February 1956, Glubb gave the king a list of Jordanian officers he proposed to demobilize from the army. This deeply angered the king, but gave him the chance to act. He convened a secret meeting of a number of loyal army officers. He told them about his desire to get rid of Glubb and asked them if they were ready to take over command of the army. When they agreed, Hussein took the decision that night to dismiss General Glubb and expel him from Jordan. The next day, on the 1st of March 1956, Hussein's forces began implementing his decision to expel Club. Club's residence in Amman was surrounded and all communications cut. King Hussein informed the government of his decision and ordered Prime Minister Samir Rifa'i to tell Club of his dismissal and that he had to leave the country immediately. Jordan was thrown into a state of shock. Opinion was divided, some hailing the move to expel Club and the British, others fearing a British backlash. Nasser didn't believe the news and thought it was just a British-American trick. While the British, on the other hand, thought Nasser was behind the plot, they protested, but Hussein spoke to the army and the nation.
أيها الضباط والجنود البواسل، أحييكم أينما كنتم وحيثما وجدتم ضباطا وحرسا وجنودا، وبعد فقد رأينا نفعا لجيشنا وخدمة لبلدنا ووطننا أن نجري بعضا من الإجراءات الضرورية في مناصب الجيش، فنفذناها متكلين على الله العلي القدير ومتوخين مصلحة أمتنا وإعلاء كلمتها، وإنني آمل فيكم كما هو عهدي بكم النظام والطاعة.
But Club's expulsion wasn't the only momentous event of 1956. Hussein decided the time was right to hold parliamentary elections, but his advisors didn't necessarily agree and were split on the issue. Those against thought pro-Nasser left-wing parties opposed to the king would win. For them, elections represented a threat to the throne, but the king insisted on their going ahead. The elections took place on the 20th of October 1956, and Hussein's advisors' deepest fears were realized. Left-wing and socialist parties won a parliamentary majority. One of the MPs elected was Yaqub Ziyaddin, the former Secretary General of the Jordanian Communist Party. He won a seat representing Jerusalem. No single party won an outright majority, but Sulaiman al-Nabulsi's National Socialist Party won the most seats, with 11. Al-Nabulsi himself failed to win a seat, but he became Prime Minister of the first elected government in Jordan, as leader of the largest party in parliament. Al-Nabulsi's government was leftist, pro-Nasser, and anti-Hashemite. It competed with the king in decision-making and tried to undermine him. Opposition to the king grew and even extended to the army. Hussein received reports of plans to stage a military coup against him. The king would not tolerate this and increasingly feared attempts to overthrow him, so he dismissed al-Nabulsi and dissolved parliament. Violence erupted over the dismissal, and in 1957, there was an attempted coup. Hussein declared martial law. When civilian rule returned the following year, political parties had been banned. Internal security was tightened. Jordan had become a totalitarian state. No sooner had Hussein dealt with his domestic crisis than a bigger and more complex challenge arose on the Arab international stage. On the 22nd of February 1958, Egypt's President Nasser announced the creation of the United Arab Republic, unifying Syria and Egypt with himself as president. As a counter to the Egypt-Syria Republic, Jordan formed the Hashemite Union with Iraq. But it did not last long. 5 months later, on the 14th of July, King Hussein received a dramatic phone call telling him of a coup against the Hashemite monarchy in Iraq. An army officer, Abdul Karim Qasim, overthrew Hussein's cousin, King Faisal II, when the army broke into the royal palace and killed him and the entire Iraqi royal family. The news shocked King Hussein. He'd lost a branch of the Hashemite family and was now isolated in relation to Nasser's United Arab Republic. The UAR orchestrated a series of events that destabilized the Jordanian regime, not least the assassination of its prime minister, Hazza al-Majali, in 1960. King Hussein also accused the UAR of making. At the end of May 1964, the formation of the Palestinian National Council was.
ويسعدني أيها الإخوة أن نلتقي اليوم في رحاب هذه المدينة المقدسة في ظل هذه الوحدة الخيرة المباركة التي تجمع الأسرة الواحدة على ضفتي النهر المقدس. إن الأردن هو بضفتيه القاعدة المثلى للانطلاق لتحرير الوطن المغتصب، لأن أسرته تضم في جوانحها جزءا لا يتجزأ منها هو الأكثرية الساحقة من شعب فلسطين، ولأن رقعته تضم في إطارها ضفته الغربية، وهي أكبر أرض احتفظت بها اليد العربية من فلسطين.
In return, the Palestinian Liberation Organization pledged not to interfere in Jordan's internal affairs or with Jordanian citizens of Palestinian origin.
وقد كانت لي اجتماعات كبرى في ضفتيه، لقد شهدت الفلسطينية أردنيا وشهدت الأردنية فلسطينيا. ومن معاني الوحدة أيها الإخوان أن انبثاق الكيان الفلسطيني في مدينة القدس لا يهدف إلى سلخ الضفة الغربية عن المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، ولكننا نهدف إلى تحرير وطننا المغتصب غرب الضفة الغربية. لا هدف لنا في الضفة الغربية، أهدافنا غرب الضفة الغربية.
The PLO came into being on the 28th of May 1964 through a series of concessions by both sides, which they hoped would set the tone for the future. But at the time, no one present foresaw what would happen 7 months later. On the 1st of January 1965, a military communique was issued by Fatah, the Palestinian Liberation Movement led by Yasser Arafat. It announced the start of the Palestinian armed struggle. Fatah and Arafat would go on to play a key role in Hussein's life and career, and in the Middle East as a whole, for the next 4 decades.